2:30 a.m., the Black Sea, 10 miles off Cape Kinburn. Here, Russia's steel defense line began to crumble before the largest UAV trap in military history. The Mura 5, a 6-meter unmanned vessel weighing over a ton, skimmed through thick fog at 74 kilometers per hour, completely invisible to radar thanks to Ukraine's optical stealth technology. Inside its hull lay 700 pounds of explosives waiting to detonate, along with 5 Shrike attack UAVs, each weighing 3 pounds, equipped with C4 and guided by 7-meter fiber optic cables immune to jamming. The target, an ammunition depot worth $50 million containing 500 tons of Grad rockets and 152mm shells, protected by a Panzer S-1 system and 30 Russian soldiers confident in their impregnable fortress. 3 days earlier, Ukraine had mapped every blind spot, calculated the 50-degree fog layer, and staged a flawless deception. The bold plan was set to unfold precisely as Russian troops raised their vodka glasses to toast their safety, unaware that they had only minutes left before hell itself broke loose in the dark. What made this operation legendary wasn't just breaking through a fortified line with $256,000 worth of equipment, but the way Ukraine struck, vanished amid the counterattack, and left Russia burning and disoriented. At 1 a.m., from a secret base, Mura V5 began its silent pursuit. Its only ally, the weather. A dense 50-degree fog blanketed the Black Sea, cutting visibility below 100 meters. The cold air created a thermal inversion that crippled Doppler radar, turning million-dollar systems into mere wind gauges. At 2:28 a.m., 5 nautical miles from Kinburn, a hatch opened. 5 Shrikes shot into the night, flying 6 meters below Earth's curvature, completely invisible to ground radar. And this was Ukraine's masterstroke. As each Shrike exited its hidden bay, a fiber optic thread thinner than a hair unfurled for 7 miles, linking directly to a control station kilometers away. While Russian forces braced for radio signals to counterattack, Ukraine used a light transmission that couldn't be jammed. On SBU screens, 1080p images streamed via Starlink, clear enough to see every spark in the night. Could 5 tiny UAVs really evade a multi-million-dollar defense system? At 2:35 a.m., inside the Panzer S-1 command vehicle, radar screens flickered. A weary officer, coffee in hand, squinted at faint blips 5 miles away. He didn't realize those ghosts were rewriting modern warfare. The KUCA-4 jammer kicked in, flooding the area with GPS interference so strong it shook the ground. 30 Russian soldiers raised infrared scopes, scanning wildly through the mist. Tracer rounds streaked across the sky. One decoy UAV exploded, lighting up the darkness. Believing victory was theirs, they didn't know it was only the opening act in Ukraine's precisely timed deception. In the command truck, a red alert flashed, unknown intrusion. At that moment, Mura V5 cut its engines, drifting like it had failed. The Russian officer smirked, convinced the enemy was retreating. He ordered a search for the launch point, marking a minor victory. But that confidence was a trap. In the fog, 4 remaining Shrikes dispersed, each carrying a fragment of the coming nightmare. They're retreating, the commander said, eyes still on the radar, unaware the tide had turned. As Russian units converged toward Mura V5, the remaining Shrikes broke formation, changed direction, and dropped altitude, vanishing from screens. Within 15 seconds, Russia's most advanced defense would be stripped bare, and its so-called invincible soldiers would become prey in a reversed hunt. 15 seconds. Then 10. The Panzer S-1's cannons swiveled erratically. In the final 5, the jammers reached full power, screens glowing in blind confidence. But as they raised their barrels, the tiny shadows had vanished. Russia was firing into emptiness against an enemy they couldn't see. A ghost army guided by light, not radio. The problem: KUCA-4 could jam every radio frequency but not light. The 0.1 mm fiber optic lines connecting controllers to each UAV rendered Russia's electronics useless. Engineers in Kyiv smiled as they watched the Panzer Beast silenced, a symbol of Russian technology reduced to a dumb hunk of metal in the fog. While all Russian fire focused on Mura V5, the remaining Shrikes executed a swarm split. Two hugged the shoreline for cover. The other two skimmed the waves like shadows, moving along two converging axes. They created a nightmare for any air defense system trying to lock onto targets through steel-thick fog. The Panzer S-1's turret strained to track faint signals. 30mm rounds screamed, tearing one Shrike apart, shredding fiber optics into the air. Russian troops cheered, believing they'd crushed the assault. But as they celebrated, an RPG narrowly clipped another drone's control line. In the SBU command room, the operator slammed his hand on the desk. The screen had gone dark. Now he flew by memory and instinct, seconds away from either restoring connection or aborting. His pulse thundered. Every calculation funneled into one decision. The two remaining UAVs dove into the radar's blind zone where Russia least expected them. If they failed, the mission would collapse. If they succeeded, Kinburn's entire defense would turn to ash in a single breath. A faint blip reappeared, just a dim dot amid static. The operator held his breath, pulling the stick to skim the fourth Shrike inches above the sea, using smoke from the downed drone as cover. On the Russian side, chaos erupted. Radars spun madly among false echoes. For 19 seconds, intellect battled panic at its breaking point. All Russian fire converged on two final blips. The Panzer's guns roared. Explosions lit the fog. Soldiers fired blindly into metallic mist. They thought they'd cornered the enemy, but that was the last feint. 3 miles offshore, Mura V5 suddenly roared back to life. Its engine howled, accelerating to full speed. The metal beast was reborn, storming ahead cloaked in wind and salt. No longer a silent shadow, Mura V5 had become a 1-ton torpedo hurtling toward the shore at 74 kilometers per hour. It exploited Panzer's fatal blind spot, the low-altitude gap where the system couldn't fire. While Russian radars still scanned the skies, the stealth vessel skimmed the surface, slipping through the no-go zone before anyone could react. At that same moment, the two remaining Shrikes changed targets, not the ammo depot, but the heart of the defense, the Panzer S-1's power generator and radar. The chess match was over. Every Russian move, every order, had been scripted by Ukraine. They weren't fighting drones. They were performing in a play whose ending was already written. Then came the final moment. From Kyiv's command center, a short order. Activate. The two Shrikes became spears of fire. Streaking like lightning, one slammed into the generator, plunging Panzer into darkness. The other struck the radar, turning the million-dollar array into smoldering scrap. In that instant, Russia was blind and deaf on its own battlefield. And then Mura V5 hit. It didn't just strike the depot gate. It tore through 3 meters of reinforced steel and concrete. 700 pounds of explosives detonated at once. The sound wasn't a blast, but a shockwave that rippled through the ocean itself. Kinburn didn't hear thunder, it felt the heartbeat of hell beneath its feet. But the explosion didn't stop there. It wasn't merely a bomb, it was a chain reaction calculated to the millisecond. First, the penetration charge bored into the concrete wall and detonated from within, generating over 5,000 pounds per square inches of pressure. The shockwave launched hundreds of 152mm shells skyward, turning the depot into a giant pressure cooker. Within milliseconds, the first blast triggered a second inferno. Over 500 tons of propellant and grad rockets ignited, forming a fire column hundreds of meters tall, temperatures surpassing 2,000 degrees. The depot didn't just explode, it inverted itself, becoming a fiery crater that devoured everything nearby. In that blinding light, sea and sky fused into a single rage. Shockwaves rippled for kilometers, obliterating remaining equipment. The electromagnetic pulse fried every circuit in the Panzer and Kuka 4 systems. What remained were cold husks, mechanical corpses stripped of soul. Russia hadn't just lost a defense line. It had lost its eyes and ears on Kinburn's coast. All comms, radar, and control went silent in one breath. The result: the most expensive fireworks in Russian history. $50 million gone in 10 seconds. From Ukraine's command base, officers watched thermal screens where the depot had been now just a blazing crater 140 meters wide. No cheers, only heavy silence as they realized the entire Black Sea defense chain had been severed by $256,000 and a perfect plan. On the ground, chaos reigned. Russian troops, deaf and blind, staggered through molten debris. Ambulances couldn't reach the site, roads were blocked by rubble and unexploded shells. Hours later, NATO satellites confirmed the depot was gone, replaced by a dark, gaping crater, the full stop to a line once called impenetrable. The loss wasn't just financial. It was strategic paralysis. Russia's Mykolaiv supply route collapsed, freezing its entire Black Sea campaign, a single act of intellect reshaping the board. The Kinburn strike wasn't Ukraine's first blow. Just 3 weeks earlier, on the 9th of September 2025, 5 other Mura V-5s hit a Russian oil depot 300 meters from the front line. Each carried 300 kilograms of explosives, flying beneath heavy fog, evading S-400 radar and disabling multi-million-dollar Tor M2 defenses. The explosion consumed 140,000 tons of fuel, turning night into a sea of fire. The damage was staggering. $100 million gone in seconds, 5 times the cost of Kinburn. In Moscow, generals panicked. How could a handful of cheap, fog-hidden fiber-optic drones humiliate a billion-dollar defense network? Emergency commissions formed. Behind closed doors, commanders began fearing for their own positions. But Kinburn's blast wasn't just a tactical failure, it was a 4-layer earthquake. Economically, Russia lost $50 million in weapons and faced $70 million in rearming costs. Financially, the ruble tumbled, and Black Sea insurance rates soared. Politically, outrage spread as images of the blast went viral. Psychologically, the front plunged into paranoia, fearing its own skies. Allies like Belarus grew cautious, delaying supplies. Russia's Mykolaiv logistics grid collapsed, naval artillery ran short. Fire rates dropped 40%. Ukraine reclaimed a 30-mile buffer around Ochakiv, able for the first time to mount an active coastal defense, a strategic turning point, achieved without firing another shot. Russian generals faced internal probes and disciplinary hearings. Footage of the shattered defense flooded social media, turning shame into public fury. In coastal villages, Ukrainians celebrated as if witnessing a miracle. SBU recruitment surged, morale soared, while Russia's rear lines faltered, haunted by the question of who would take the blame. This wasn't merely a technical triumph, it was psychological warfare. Russia lost confidence. Soldiers lost sleep, haunted by drones. Commanders lost faith in their prized systems. The 30-mile buffer around Ochakiv reopened. Supply lines froze. And Black Sea strategy flipped, a chess move whose echo would outlast the explosion itself. Ukraine proved that modern warfare is the art of creativity and calculated audacity. A seemingly invincible target can fall to code, fog, and a filament of glass. If you admire that ingenuity, like and share this story. Tell us which moment impressed you most, and what you would do if you were in command. Will Ukraine use AI to defeat the S-400 next? The question remains unanswered. But one thing is clear. A superpower of yesterday now faces the consequences of its mistakes today.